All right, I think let's start and people will join as we move along. So, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Good evening to our wonderful panelists. Really looking forward to the session and learning as much as we can from you ladies both. So, I have 2 pages worth of questions, but really want the session. We want the session to be conversational, right? And the audience online, please feel free to post in the chat comments. I will be looking at that throughout the session. So thank you, Cece and Marianne, for joining us. Unfortunately, Chandra couldn't join us this evening, but she did say she'll join future webinars when she gets the chance. So really appreciate you both for being here and our audience online. And I have both of your bios with me, but really would love to give you both a chance to introduce yourself. So Marianne, let's start with you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity, and good afternoon to everybody else. Thank you for the invite. I usually don't take these things lightly, so I do appreciate you bringing me to your platform as well. So, Mary Ann Kekana, when introducing myself, it's in twofold. From a personal front, I'm a mother, a wife, a sister, and I really pride myself in that. And then from a professional perspective, I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Connect Me within the F&B space. What we look at is customer experience in terms of the portfolio, setting up data governance, management, and all of those things. And yeah, that has been.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. Cece, can I call you Cece?
Yes, of course.
Yes, please go ahead and just give us an intro of you.
Hi, so my name is Cece, sometimes go by Ceci as well. I'm the founder of Three Standard Deviations. I'm a quant researcher focused on consumer experience. In my most recent roles, I was the former head of data sciences for Moet Hennessy, part of the LVMH family, so FMCG, luxury FMCG. I was also the former head of data analytics at L'Oreal, so I also have some experience in beauty as well. And I'm so excited for the conversation today because everyone wants to do the data. Everyone wants to do the AI, but how do you actually make that happen and realize value inside of organizations? We have to talk about culture.
Yes, yes, I love that. Oh, nice. We have someone from Morocco. Welcome, Frank. I hope I'm pronouncing your name accurately. But welcome and welcome to everyone else online. So, like I said, let's keep the group chat moving. I love how Cece's introduction of, tonight we're really talking about building a data-driven culture. It's really quite a topical and trending topic, right? And so, Cece, I just, since you opened the floor, really would love to gain your thoughts on how do you approach, a shared understanding of value in an organization in order to drive that conversation of building a data-driven culture.
So I'm also a bit of an academic as well. So I tend to bring a little bit of psychology, sociology, anthropology into my conversations. So if we
Yes.
take the construct of culture from sociology, what is it? It is shared values, beliefs, attitudes, and norms that we
Mm,
reinforce through ritual. And so when I'm thinking about an organization that's trying to create definitions of what data means to them, I'm
mm,
constantly thinking about, well, what are the values do we reinforce? What are the forums or the rituals that help us to practice those values? And so I'm constantly thinking more concretely, how do I tell stories with data? Because the way we connect to each other is via stories. How do I find the individuals that are already naturally interested in data? And they
mm.
exist. Why? Because we're naturally curious. We're naturally scientific. It's just along the way, we sometimes forget that. So finding those data champions inside of an organization. And data, I argue, is a creative art. I will continue to argue that. And what's for me is that you don't really get good at it until you play with it. You try to create with it. You mess up with it. And
Mm.
so finding the spaces inside of your organization such that you can start to play with data, understand it better, have understanding of the needs of the organization. I consider that all components of trying to figure out what does data mean in terms of value for an organization.
I think you really touched on an important point because I was having a conversation with another data leader, and they said that the best leaders have that element of understanding psychology and behavior and so forth. And so, just touching on that point, what would you say has been the most transformative book around psychology for you?
Okay, so a little bit more personal for me. So I studied international business, one of my degrees, when I was
Mm,
younger, and I'm always fascinated with understanding different cultures. And the reason why is that the diversity of points of view and experience
mm,
and background, it just makes a kaleidoscope of colors when you're trying to solve problems inside of an organization. So I got really obsessed about that. There is a researcher, a social psychologist, Hofstede,
mm,
who really pushed forward dimensions of cultural diversity. There are there are other frameworks as well. There are other researchers as well, but I highly recommend that specific researcher. Not only because he was one of the forefathers in kind of developing that part of the discipline, but it's very accessible. And so I always caution with the academic stuff, it's great, but it needs to be
yes,
applied in business. So I
yes.
find his work to be a little bit more applicable.
I agree. I love that. I love that. And building up on that, Marianne, what would you say are like the important steps to really break down silos and encourage collaboration between data teams and business units in an organization?
So, and then I think it's a very good question, right? Because breaking down silos means that you actually need to go back and understand exactly why do they actually exist in the first place. You know,
Mm,
as you can't solve something without actually understanding why. How did we actually come to a point where we have these kind of environmental silos, right? Becomes important. So usually is the approach is trying to understand why are we structured in this manner, historically what has happened. As data professionals, this is where we actually start collecting the data that we need in order for us to actually solve it. But it takes that as understanding the kind of environment and what has constituted for us to be in the environment that we are in. What you need after understanding all of that, and usually when we speak about silos, I think it's quite important because we speak about silos in terms of data teams and other areas. We never
mm,
talk about that actually exist within our own teams as well. And what becomes important when we want to deal with the silo construct is how do you break down the silos that exist within your own team first before you can actually go out and solve these silo construct outside of your own outside of your own team. So for me, the steps that I usually take is that let me look at my own team. What are the processes that we are finding? And let's break down those silos because then we're making sure that we are ready to service business in terms of tackling this construct of how do we break down the silos. And the second thing is, and this is one of my favorite one, is engagement.
mm,
And not in a formal type of a meeting. You know, people tend to be very defensive, when you set up like formal sessions at first.
yeah.
As what I found is like coffee chats, getting to suss out the environment with the different stakeholders that exist within your area. People are most likely to tell you exactly what is happening or why things are the way that they are. It gives you good ideas in terms of when you have the formal sessions, it gives you good ideas in terms of how you package it all together to take them on the journey that you want them to be on,
Mm,
right? But it's because it's not formal that they're actually going
mm,
to join into this whole thing. And you're using those sessions as well to gather information, understanding. And this takes a lot of listening. You're not solving at this point, is you are listening as the person that needs to actually come up with all of these things. And in that, as you're engaging with the different stakeholders, is you start building up your stakeholder matrix. Your stakeholders are first they don't have the same power in terms of influence. And the way that you're going to engage with them from a difficulty and easy perspective, it's also not the same. So your stakeholder matrix becomes important because you have to know that these are your difficult stakeholders, these are your easy stakeholders that you need to engage with. And because if you're starting off, your easy stakeholders are actually the ones that you want to work with, because it drives you faster to where you want to go in terms of the goals that you have actually identified. And depending on where they are, they become your advocates, right? As soon as this actually works out, as they become your advocates to the people that are actually quite difficult. So that's how strategically you want to play it, is get the people that are easy, that are so supportive of it, get them on board with you. And then thereafter, it's so easy that they start championing for you in all the different areas, to be like, I've worked with this person and we've seen what is it that they're doing. It becomes much easier from an adoption perspective. We also need to remember that we need to take people on a journey. As much as we talk about it in terms of it's data-driven, we need to realize that not everybody is on the same level. And breaking down those silos is understanding people in terms of where they are. It could be data literature, is where are they in the different business units, right? Understand that so that you can take them on the journey. You start planning all of these things for them in order for you to take them on the journey, in order for these things to quite move further. The one thing in terms of breaking silos, I would definitely say effective communication, listening becomes quite critical at that point. But don't forget that this is a journey that you want support as well, right? As you want them to support you on this journey. Take them on the journey, take the people on the journey. And also, if you start showing, as you are doing this, is you're going to have successes, celebrate those successes very loudly. They start buying into what is it that you are selling at that point. I think what is important is just that engagement layer. It becomes so much easy that you focus on people that you know are going to readily champion what you are proposing, and then through your stakeholder matrix in terms of building or breaking down those silos.
Yeah, I love that. You shared like some really valuable insights there. But like that first, I don't know if you've read that book, 90 Days, right? Your first 90 days in the workspace. And so in that first 90 days, there's also the question around value, right? And so when you're trying to have these conversations and have the coffee chats, and I love what you said around not in a forum, not in a formal meeting setup, but then whilst you're still building these conversations and understanding where the silos are and so forth, how then are you doing that simultaneously while chasing the target of trying to build or prove value as a data leader?
So and those two cannot, like, they have to exist in conjunction, right? As you're having the conversation, is how, to your point, is how do you immediately show value in terms of the conversation that we have just had? Like I said, you are listening. In your listening, what you quickly realize is that if I do this, I'm going to get a true return in terms of adoption and gaining traction on it. Then others might need projects for you to actually run on, right? It takes you to assess that if I do this, I'm going to quickly get the kind of value that I want. And it's amazing that we're using data. People get excited by the smallest things, right? Well, we know that it takes a lot of work, but it's how do you then make sure that as you are listening, those things that you're identifying as you are chatting to the stakeholders that are quick wins, you slot them in and deliver them as quickly as possible. Because then, like I said, these people start championing for you because they can see the true value. They won't champion it if they don't see the value out of it. But it becomes so tangible that what you have identified and what you are delivering, we can actually back you up. And for the bigger project, we're definitely going to support the initiatives. And it becomes so much easier when you start talking at it at that level.
I really want to pause it because you said something super powerful around the people element. And Sissy, just really would love you to address, the potential resistance to change, especially from, employees that are used to traditional intuition-based, gut-based decision making. And so how do you go around addressing that on that people element.
Yeah, that's a definite challenge in these types of roles for sure. I'm actually curious from the audience. I really loved what Marianne had shared around challenges and how we can overcome siloing. People in the audience, put it into the chat or put yourself off mute. I'm curious, do you find yourself in a silo inside of your organizations as you're trying to develop your own data leadership practice? And if so, if you have tips and tricks, I'm curious to learn as well. So if
Mm,
anyone wants to put that in chat, do you feel like you're in a silo? Yes or no? Maybe not. I'm curious to learn.
yes.
Regarding resistance to change, it's interesting, the inertia that happens inside of organizations, in the sense that they know they have to do data, they know theoretically the value from data. However,
Mm,
the level of effort required to fully realize the value of data, that's hard work. And some organizations have different priorities, and so that makes it challenging. So I find whenever I run into any resistance, I immediately put on my compassionate hat, my listening hat, because I'm curious. Nobody goes to work trying to mess things up. Everyone wants to do a good job. So help me understand, what are the incentives of this individual that they're resisting? So maybe
mm,
their bonus structure is focused on a certain KPI that's against maybe experimentation in data. What is the motivation of this individual? We talked a little bit about hierarchy and power structures. Maybe for this individual, they're under threat. And so they're just trying to hold on to whatever influence they have within the organization. So change is risk, and therefore they may not want to engage with the data and analytics team. And so understanding the incentives, the motivations, and ultimately the behavior that you're observing, which is they're resisting you, can
yeah.
help you better contextualize, okay, everyone's trying to do a good job. Everyone has some level of positive intent. How do I better navigate this? And so
Mm,
what I tend to do, I have a carrot and stick approach. So the benefits, and within the benefits, the carrot side or the cake side, maybe, I think about what is the kind of offense and defense. So on the offense side, can I help the stakeholder figure out a way to increase the value or revenue that they're driving for the organization? That's top line
mm,
growth. Most stakeholders love that. On the
yeah.
other side, maybe their organization is a little bit inefficient because they have been kind of entrenched in more traditional practices that they haven't looked and reflected upon themselves recently. So, can I find cost savings for them or efficiency plays for them that utilize data? And so, those are two real tangible ways of looking at the
Mm,
value of data for a stakeholder that may be resisting you. And then I always find bring more friends to the party. On the stick side, I find my biggest allies when I'm first engaging inside of an organization, I always look for my CFOs. I look for my financial controllers because they're the first ones to say, this is all nice. Where is it in my cash flow? Where is this in my P&L? All these nice
mm,
words are great, but we
yeah.
need to run a profitable business. And so I find the areas that the CFOs inside of an organization or the controllers or heads of finance are very worried about, those are
Mm,
the areas that are such low-hanging fruit to find those stakeholders that may still be resistant to change, but because they have other externalities kind of forcing that change function, they're more likely to engage with you. So
mm,
carrot and stick, understanding in incentive motivation and the behaviors, and then
mm,
my quantitative allies in finance, that I've always found them to be very, very helpful, especially when thinking about those conversations, initial conversations when there is resistance.
yeah.
And then I totally agree with Marianne, just having them talk and picking out what are those quick wins. Oh, it is such a way to build credibility. It is such a way to build trust between different departments and parts of the organization. And
Mm,
also, everyone wants to everyone wants to experience a win within their groups, and so therefore it creates a coalescing type of event to say, "Hey, we can make this work. Hey, we can start." And it's also, I find that's quick wins. they don't always have to be super big. And
Yes.
if they're not super big, it's that, again, going back to ritual, it's those small rituals that build up over time that reinforces the value of data within an organization.
Yeah, I mean, we have some couple of questions. Thank you for that. But I really love how you both speak around stakeholder management, right? And the importance of it and the importance of engagement and communication and effective communication. But just and this is directed to you both, in your experience, do you struggle with the stakeholder and buy-in from the top level, so your ESCO management committee, or is this the interns and the employees or the larger organization base? Just really would love to hear you. Marianne's laughing, so Marianne, maybe you go first.
Um, no, I think it's quite an interesting one. Funny enough, and now I'll speak about my organization, right? At an exco level, I don't have those issues. I've got proper buy-in from an exco level. It's the level underneath that becomes quite interesting in terms of resistance, right? And it's exactly what CC said, right? It's so associated with a lot of other stuff. Is this going to take away my job? This like it's all these emotional stuff that they now linked to it. Where else from an ex would be yes, we agree this is the direction that we want to take. But we have found it wasn't necessarily at the exco level. It was just having to deal with the level underneath. But like I said, how you actually break down the silos becomes quite important. It's not about taking people's job or taking them out of the job. It's understand how this benefits them in the process, right? And that's where the value becomes important for you to partner with them. And as how do you actually partner with these people at the level that they are at in order for them to actually get on and support you at the same time? And that takes a lot of engagement, and you can't take that away. It takes a lot of engagement to get them to actually journey with you.
Thank you. Cece, do you want to add on to that, or should I just? There's a question here for you from Zach.
Okay. Just so in the event people are just listening, did you say the areas that the CFO might be worried about? Could there be areas with lots of low-hanging fruit for data use cases? I love this question because of the positive intent that you want to create as much value as you can within your organization as a leader in a data function. The tension that I find in my personal experience is that while we want to be helpful, I've always been under the conditions of very finite resources. And so being choiceful of where I can lean in initially to demonstrate value for the organization and then ask for bigger budget and then ask for additional resources to fulfill broader initiatives. I've found in practice that focusing where on the financial components first is the fastest way to get that buy-in unless there's already pre-existing budget or pre-existing strategy that's fully aligned. The reason why I argue this is that I've also been in situations where in our eagerness to be so helpful to the organization and demonstrate, oh, we can do data literacy, we can make everyone citizen data scientists, we ended up becoming a concierge service. So rather than stakeholders participating actively in the relationship with a data and analytics function, it became like a ticket counter. Can you fetch me this number? Can you fetch me this analysis? Can you fetch me? And when it comes to what is the ROI of the team, demonstrate the incremental value that the team is delivering for the organization quantitatively, too many small projects, while still very helpful and excellent at building relationships and rapport, at the end of the day, as a data leader, you have to be choiceful with finite resources. How do I defend the budget that I already have? And how do I utilize the finite resources I have to demonstrate that it's outsized value and therefore continue to invest resources? If we're fortunate enough that there's a significant amount of support from the Exco and you have timelines that are extended, great. If not, then I find that this strategy allows you to deliver value in the places where your exco is going to pay the most attention to.
Thank you. I like that. And it speaks to prioritization, right? And how do you go about prioritizing those strategic wins that really add ample value? So Nosizo has a question for you, Marianne. She says, I like what Marianne mentioned regarding silos within data teams. This has been a major issue, and sometimes due to the diverse technical skills required, teams may find it challenging to break out of their own limitations. How do you motivate your team to gain exposure from other teams and upskill themselves without neglecting their own deliverables?
I actually love that question, right? Because I'm a big advocate for my team in terms of growth, and I think this also goes back to also we're talking about data culture. There's also a company culture or a team culture that we're also creating, right? But then our team culture itself is, are we encouraging for people to actually partner with other teams as well? Because if you haven't, it becomes quite difficult for people to know that they can engage with other teams, right? So in my team is I really do encourage collaboration between the different business units because it's important. There's a lot of subject matter experts that exist in those areas. There's a lot of information that exists there. So it becomes so difficult to solve for areas where you actually don't know them. So that must already be it should be motivated that it is okay to actually partner with all of these people and be deliberate in setting up knowledge sharing sessions where you're bringing all these different people together, where it's starting to be normalized that it's okay for us to be in a room and share knowledge. Doesn't matter where the domain is, but it needs to be something that we are encouraging internally within the team, that it's okay for us to do it. What you start seeing is that people actually are going to collaborate amongst each other to get value from each other. Then the other thing that we spoke about is upskilling themselves without impacting deliverables. I find that very interesting because upskilling, we should actually look at upskilling as a deliverable, right? As we're trying to take people to get to a point where we want them to start delivering value for us. Upskilling cannot be seen as a side hustle. It is not. As we want our people to be skilled well enough in order for them to deliver value for us. So it becomes important, whether you're putting it in terms of your performance, structure upskilling as part of something that you track, because we are expecting our people to grow with us as an organization. And if we park it as something that is on the side, they're going to treat it as such. It's going to be something on the side. But if you park it as or if you treat it as something that is important, it automatically becomes part of what we are doing as a team. Even if it means that we book out an hour a day in our calendar to do upskilling, allow that for your teams, in order for them to grow in the different domains. Of course, you will be evaluating what becomes more important for them. However, we need to create a culture within our teams as well that allows all of these different things, because we know that as soon as they're upskilled, we're getting the value that we want. For as long as there's skill shortages or gaps, will forever be in the back foot in terms of the strategy that we actually want to deliver.
Mm-hmm. And I love what you just said around the intentionality, right, of setting time aside. So, like in our team, we have Friday mornings from 9 to 11 is just research. Just find out what are other organizations doing. Just spend time reading towards data science, medium. There's so much, right? And we always talk about there's AI, there's this research, but we don't engage in those brainstorming sessions because you don't have time because you're pushing deliverables. So I love what you said around intentionally saying, give your team that time, that hour, and then make it part of KPIs, a bonus structure, and show that intentionality around it. So just moving us back into the whole data and culture. I mean, that's like quite an abstract concept, and like sometimes it's quite difficult to measure the tangible features of it. So, Marianne, just to you, how do you define clear goals and metrics, to track progress towards a data-driven culture?
I think the goals, or in my opinion, I think the goals are, in terms of setting them up, it's quite simple. What is the organization trying to achieve, right? What are the organizational goals? We don't go into these things without understanding what is it the organization trying to achieve, whether it's efficiencies, whether it's innovation, whether it's customer experiences. From an organization perspective, what are the goals that they're trying to do? And once we understand what those goals are, is we actually need to also assess what is the desired behavior that we actually want as well, right? Because whatever goal you are setting, what are the different practices and behaviors that you want to achieve as you're setting out those goals? Then I think it starts putting a framework for you in order to come up with those goals. And with all goals, they have to be smart. I think we all understand, they have to be smart, achievable, and all of those things. But I think what becomes important is, and maybe let's take an example. Let's say one of your goals is improve data quality. Let's say that is you've assessed everything, and then improve data quality is one of them. So that's the goal. There are KPIs that can go with this goal, right? Because you have to break down your goal in terms of how you're going to measure it. Within your data quality, you can say, I want to measure accuracy, completeness. That's the things that I want to measure. Your baseline, where am I today and what are my targets, right? And baselining means there's a lot of work that needs to go, because you need to check where are we, and this is the area that we want to go in, so that you can start tracking if you're making progress or not, right? Once you've done all your baseline, you make sure that you monitor progress when it comes to all the goals that you have. If you can't measure it, you don't know if you're progressing in them. And if you're not doing that, is it really a goal? So you just need to make sure that you're monitoring progress in terms of the goal that you have set up. What becomes important as we put up goals, as we've got activities that we are aligning to attain these goals, we need to also be conscious that nothing is silver bullet. We might have got structures in place. We might say that this is the goal, but in the process, there's a lot of things that we are learning as well. We have to be flexible enough to take all the learnings, go back and check that the assumptions that we had made at first, is it still aligned? We need to be able to iterate again so that we can move forward. At that stage, it becomes important that just go back, test yourself, and make sure that are we still on the right track? If not, how do we readjust so that we can move forward in terms of these goals that we're trying to measure? And I think I always talk about this, especially when you've got goals. Make sure you communicate and you celebrate. Like these goals, at some point, you're going to get them right. Even if it's to move from a 0 to a 10, make the biggest noise that they've ever heard. Why? Just because they start seeing progress in terms of the things that you are delivering. Like data quality is a very back-end thing, but it's linked to every other measure from an organization perspective. If you link it back to where the organization also wants to go, it starts showing true value, and it shows movement and commitment from the team in terms of where you want to go. So I would say that just make sure that you celebrate the little wins along the way when it comes to these goals. But goals don't go, whatever goals that you're going to set up cannot be outside of what the organization is trying to achieve.
Let's just take it, a level deeper, if I can say, and just around, the people element. I mean, you mentioned coffee conversations and engaging with people one-on-one. So then when you're measuring, are we moving towards the right data-driven culture that we want to achieve based on our goals? Are you measuring in terms of, I spoke to Cece last week, she really wasn't keen. I spoke to Cece, 2 months or a month later, and now she is leaning towards that. How are you measuring around the people element there?
So, and maybe let's take data, because data literacy is more on the people side, right? If we look at it, right, is how literate are your people? So if you had to look at that one and let's say training, so some sort of training becomes it. It could be that an increase in training people, for me, that's the measures we're getting people and we are adopting in that sense. But if I had a conversation with Cece and she is not coming to the party in terms of the goals that we are having, I think this is where having to be real. Some things work, some things don't work. If where we are, it's not working, we need to reassess what is it, or how can we actually get Cece to partner with us? And that will take the work for us to go and back and reiterate, because we don't want to leave her behind in our journey. And it would need us to take extra work just so that we can get to her. At the end of the day, we're trying to move forward together and not leave anybody behind. Like I said, some stakeholders are very easy, others are difficult, but in their difficulty, we do not leave them behind, as we just need to reiterate and find a way that we can get to them, even if it means now scheduling sessions with just them to get them on the journey. That becomes important because we need to meet them at the level that they are at.
Thank you for that. Zach has a question for you, Marianne, before I move on to my next question. So I think you've touched on it, but he's asking specifically on, what you said on the data usage, value created with data into your bonus structure. Have you found any other good general motivators? For example, if you have a data community, could you do a data awards or share key successes with the CEO, or perhaps have a company-wide newsletter? So just really asking for other examples to drive the data-driven culture.
So the newsletter, yeah, and this is where we start. So within our BU, we do have a comms team, right? So I largely use our comms team to do, whether it's data quality, data records management, like all of these things that we don't have newsletters for. I do that once a month for the different domains. Because you need to remember, like I said, as you baseline, let's say you're starting off at 0, as you go to the next level, you're starting to show value. And the more you make noise, people are actually also more interested, right? So it's one of the ways we do have a newsletter. Very fortunate as well is our organization has got what we call lead co, where we call everybody in the organization. We get a slot where we start making noise in terms of the things that we have achieved, right? That's good PR for us. Also with people that we have partnered and we've got success stories, we don't tell the stories, we allow them to tell the stories on our behalf in terms of the things that they have achieved using, or partnering with us when it comes to this journey. I think those are some of the things that we have found, but I think also within our own data team, it becomes important that as much as it's outside, it's within our team, let's make sure that those awards and rewards, we also actually do it there. We have to appreciate the people that are doing the hard work, even if it's not in a public platform. But every day there are people that are sweating all of these concepts, and how do we make sure that we reward them effectively for all their hard work?
Thank you for that. Love that. The reward element, I think that's missing in most organizations, right? We talk the game of data, but really when it comes to remuneration or recognition, you see the P&L people or business units really being shouted out loud. So I really, really love that. So Cece, just you've worn so many hats, or you wear so many hats. You even introduced yourself as an academic researcher. Just share with us some of the emerging trends that you're seeing in terms of building a data-driven culture.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on the current conversation around recognition and rewards. I think as a data leader, understanding that you have all sorts of talent within your organization, being mindful of what does recognition mean for certain individuals, and what does reward mean for certain individuals. So you may have highly technical talent, and the reward for them is getting a ticket to a conference that nobody in the business side will understand at all, but it allows them to sharpen their skills. And for them, that's a reward and recognition for their expertise. For some individuals, they just want a public thank you. And so recognizing that sometimes even a public thank you can sometimes just be an email from a business stakeholder through a delivery or a difficult conversation to say, hey, I see you. I recognize this is not easy. Thank you. And so being a leader, understanding what really motivates you, your team individually as well as collectively in terms of rewards and recognition, I think is critically important. And then more concretely, other fun things that I've done in other organizations. I love the idea that Marianne was explaining regarding when you have this forum where you have multiple teams or business units or functions gathering together. I always made sure that, one, I had a slot because we had to shout it out to the world what's coming down the pipeline that we're so excited about. And we also instilled as part of a ritual for my team is we constantly were expressing gratitude to our business partners. And by doing that little bit, our names started popping up in their presentations, in their conversations. And so that reciprocal, like, I recognize you, I recognize we're very different, but we're both adding value, that does so much in terms of changing the culture. More fun things I've done. I literally had, I don't know, I don't know all the education systems around the world, but a science fair is something that's very common in the US, where students will bring their, they usually have a board, and it shows them an experiment they've run. And it's a way for them to practice scientific communication, as well as, frankly, just practicing talking about their work. And so I did a corporate version of that, and we literally called it a science fair. And we were intentional about it because we wanted to create the psychological safety. We're learning, we're making mistakes,
Yeah.
and we're proud that we're making mistakes because that's how we're actually driving the learning for the organization. So we were quite intentional about it. And people on my team and other analytics individuals within the organization, they actually did have poster boards, and we did have executive leadership literally walk around the different stations to hear about the work. And because we created a space where it was okay to ask questions, our executives were asking questions that they wouldn't normally ask in a boardroom situation because we don't ask those types of questions in boardroom situations. So that was a really fun way of allowing people to share their work regardless of level and creating the space for people to ask questions. And I would also say, um, it's related to, I would say, also part of the science fair, and one of the positive outputs was there were certain executives that were so curious about the work and like, oh, I see. How do I extract more value from something like this? We actually started a reverse mentoring program. What do I mean by reverse mentoring? So my more mid-level talent or a more experienced talent, they were very interested in understanding the business strategy. Okay, I'm really good with the maths. I'm really good with the programming. How does this tie better to the bigger picture? And so they wanted to understand strategy, which is good, part of their professional development. On the other side, I have a lot of executive seniors that built wonderful, successful careers on their intuition, on previous practices. And this was an opportunity for them to not only reskill, but also upskill in a psychologically safe way. And so the reverse mentoring was an opportunity for technical talent to have exposure to executives, which is great for succession planning and professional development. And also, it provided those executives a one-on-one space to say, I hear this thing called the cloud. Explain to me the cloud. I hear this thing called AI. It's not a verb, right? So like it creates that space to develop those relationships, upskill and reskill across both sides, and better tie the work of the individuals on the team to the strategy, to decision processes inside of the organization. So those are all real things. I say it in a lovely, excited way in transparency. Some of these projects were 18 months. Some of these projects took 24 months to convince people to let's just try it. It is definitely a journey when it comes to when you're trying to create something that may appear a little bit unfamiliar for an organization. In terms of emerging trends, there's so much information in the ecosystem. There's sensors everywhere. There's data flowing everywhere. You pull out a drawer, a virtual drawer. They have data stored in an email on a PDF. There's data everywhere and information everywhere. There's very little insight. And so while there will be a lot more and exponentially a lot more information, where I tend to focus on as a data leader is, okay, great, we're going to have more data, we're going to have more data, we're going to have more information. What are the critical thinking skills that will help to future-proof my organization and reinforcing those skills, which is part of data literacy, part of data fluency. I tend to say data literacy less and more fluency. And the reason why I say this is I'm not asking every single person to become a data scientist. I don't want them to be. That would definitely be really expensive. And it's not in the best interest of an individual who doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
And therefore, whatever your role is, if you're a strategist and you just need to have some level of ability to communicate in data with a data and analytics function, fantastic. If you are a principal data scientist, yes, I'm going to expect you to have a little bit more data fluency. I like the word fluency because it is a range. It's not on or off. It's not I'm suddenly data literate or I'm not. It's depending on the context of the situation, depending on the role of the individual in the situation, how much you flex and practice those muscles will determine how fluent you actually need to be. So when I'm speaking to my platform counterparts, my IT counterparts, do we have to talk about architectures? Yes. Do we have to talk about compute? Yes. And the conversations can get quite technical. Am I expecting a business stakeholder to necessarily join? Sure, why not? I love open conversations. However, is it necessary for the role? No. That's why I exist. That's why my team exists. When it's consumer facing, so when you're facing the public, um, does it have to be does it have to be significantly technical? No. Maybe we tell the story of the data and the insights through analogies instead of being technical. Here's what the model said. Here's the AIC, BIC scores, et cetera, et cetera. And so I find that with more information, critical thinking and data fluency will be key skills we're going to have to think about as data leaders. We've already said it, it's about relationships and building credibility. That doesn't go away. As long as people are part of the equation, and they will be, being able to develop those relationships of trust, of beneficial exchange, will be critical, not only in the near term, but as well as in the long term. So it is a trend, but it's a trend that's going to stick. And then I would say there are going to be disruptions for sure as AI becomes more ubiquitous. Within organizations, it's going to be up to us as data leaders to help guide other leaders in terms of, okay, does this make sense for us to try to automate through AI? Does this make sense to try to create with AI? Understanding the trade-offs. Things are moving so fast. Actually, our organizations are depending on us as experts in our fields to help them navigate. And so the AI component, it's fun because it's exciting and fast, but it's also, I consider it a duty and responsibility to the organization to help other leaders to understand what are the implications. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the ethical thing to do? What does this mean for a broader organization in terms of the people and the culture? So that's that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love the element of or the concept of data fluency because yeah, people are always like data literate or data not, you know. But just on the data fluency, I've always heard this concept or the saying that humans that use AI will replace humans that don't. So we'd just really love to hear your view on that in terms of that data fluency. Do I encourage my team to learn because there's this, and I can't remember where I read it, but somewhere. And that's like the saying, right? That you have to know your chat GPT if you don't, in terms of speed, in terms of coding. But yeah, we'd just really love to hear your view on that.
I am a firm believer that data is a creative discipline. And so if we have a new tool in our toolkit, like AI, we should experiment. I say that mindfully, intentionally, and cautiously. Why? I think it's so critical to have a foundational level of understanding of how the maths work inside of the machine. Why? Because, or even just I would argue, even the basics of understanding input, process, output, or GIGO, maybe, if we come from a IT background. And the reason why I say this is that there's already cases of individuals inside of the organizations, with the fervor and excitement of utilizing AI technologies like generative AI, they've uploaded proprietary data inside of ChatGPT. Ooh, okay. A data professional who has an understanding of the ins and outs, not all the details, but like the understanding of what goes in, something gets processed, something comes out, may have said, "Oh gosh, maybe we should not put proprietary information inside of ChatGPT." So that's like a safety guide. So I feel that it's important that you test into it because not all AI techniques, not all AI methods will work for your organization. The output is great, but it has no impact on your organization until somebody makes a decision and somebody takes an action. So if the decision processes inside of your organization is not yet ready for potential outputs from AI, then I would say keep it in a very R&D kind of function, meaning let's learn how it works, but let's not put it into production, of course. If your organization is ready, then this is where all the regulatory components that affect some of our organizations, the ethics of it all, responsible AI that would affect the organization, and frankly, the consumer expectation. It's a great tool. It's a tool that can create a lot of value. But anytime I have a business stakeholder that like sees the shiny object and they're like, yes, let's go invest, let's put some resources against it. The first thing I say is the technology is irrelevant. It's going to be out of date soon enough. What is the value proposition to the consumer? What is our customer? What are we offering the customer that can only be enabled through this technology experience? Help me understand. If they can't really answer, then it's really about baubles and shiny things, and then your organization takes on technical debt, which is not good. And so I find that having business stakeholders anchor on that value to the customer and consumer can help to kind of mitigate the excitement. But again, I'm all for experimentation, but just with caution and guardrails such that we are not exposing the organization to unneeded risk.
I love that. And I think a lot of, you make such a valid point around the shiny object, right? A lot of organizations will say, we need to enhance our competitive advantage, we need to be future world fit and so forth. And so we need to implement all of this, but the why around understanding what's the value? Is it for the customer? Is it for us internally? That why element is really missing in a lot of conversations. So, Marianne, I just want to ask you this question because we have a few aspirational leaders on the line. So, what advice do you have for other CDOs who are just starting the journey of building a data-driven culture?
Yeah, I think I'll link it back to the question that you had asked me. What I would say is that it's not outside of your organizational objectives, right? Is you just need to make sure whatever it is that you're doing, align it to whatever the organizational goals are. I think it streamlines it for you quite nicely if you do that. So I'll start there. And data-driven cultures are not outside of people. I think it becomes I think we make it such a technical thing as well, but it's not outside people. And when we say that it's not outside people, there's just a huge amount of work in terms of you advocating and educating it, and it becomes that journey. So you need to advocate and show value for why we need to make data-driven decisions, right? As what is it that we're trying to drive, whether it's innovation or efficiencies. It becomes important that as the CDO, you actually advocate for the benefits, but also take and educate the people on the journey that you're trying to embark. I would also say that you need to lead by example. You can't say one thing and then you do the other. As a person that is advocating for this environment, it becomes important that you just make sure that you lead by example. And if we have to take it from a technical perspective, is establishing things like data governance, your policies, your standards, that becomes important. And if you look at data governance, there's a lot of other domains that sits around it, right? Then you can start looking at your architecture and all of those things. But there's different domains that sits within the governance. But make sure that all your policies and your standards are well defined in order for this to move forward. Focus on value creation. I think that becomes quite important. Those quick wins as you're having the conversations, prioritize the things that you know are going to get you the most value, the most cheerleading along the way, as the quickest buy-ins. Focus on those things as well as you move along the way. And I would also say that be persistent and be patient. Like I said, if you have to break down your stakeholders, you've got different stakeholders. Others are very easy, others are actually not. But you have to be patient because you're trying to take them on this journey. So I would also say that promote collaboration. We spoke about breaking down silos. On this journey, breaking down those silos becomes quite important. You need to encourage collaboration between different teams within your own team, and be very intentional to set up an environment that allows that kind of collaboration between your teams. Now, I think if you do that, I think you've got a nice framework to get going. And I'm very intentional to not make it a technical thing, because this is a people conversation, right? And like I said, we need to meet people in terms of where they are. And then let's journey with them in terms of where we want to go from an organizational perspective.
I love that. Thank you. And we have 5 minutes left. Where did the time go, guys? Unbelievable. So, yeah, actually 4 minutes left. So just in 2 minutes, just give your closing remarks, right? And just really also touch on, there's this whole skills gap, and these are the future skills that one should be learning. Just share your view on that. And then in terms of, well, in my experience, I feel like a lot of young people are upskilling, but the gap is between the newly skilled, your Microsoft certification, and then that leadership element. So, but really would love to hear in your closing remarks just around skills gap and how do I upskill moving forward, just looking at the future world of work. Cece can go. Yeah.
So, two camps. The first camp is continuously practice your soft skills, because no matter where you are in your career, your network is your network, and therefore your ability to create those relationships is what helps you propel forward, but also catches you when there's something that unexpected that happens. So those soft skills, again, learning to listen well, learning to understand other people's point of view, incorporating different ideas, and just being really active in that, super important no matter what level. On the technical side, I am a technician as well, and so I try my best to keep up to date regarding the latest NLP papers and ML papers. And so reading some of that academic work gives you longer vision because they don't operationalize immediately. So you may see what could be commercial opportunities 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line. So I do keep both a qualitative and a quantitative skill set component. And then I am a big advocate for this is fun, this is exciting. We have to practice reflection and self-awareness all the time. Is this right for me now? And the answer is okay to say, you know what, this is too much. I actually want to focus on something else. That's okay. That's a brilliant, courageous leadership move. And being compassionate with yourself, because this is not easy at all.
Beautiful. I'm all fuzzy inside. I love it. Marianne, your view?
I think very similar to CC. Absolutely concur on the soft skills, right? As the way that we have to communicate these things become quite critical. So I completely agree. Just ongoing when it comes to soft skills becomes important. What I also do in terms of my team as well is like I said, very, very intentional in terms of their growth and upskilling, right? What I also say with the team, whether it's harsh or not, I'm not sure, but whenever we have to do things like training, right, is you need to show me some sort of commitment from your side that you did try to do this first before we actually invest in paying for it for ourselves. So in the organization already, we've got like Udemy licenses that we give to everybody. So if you want the training, show me to some extent that you have tried to do this yourself, and then it's so easy for me to motivate as well and say like you are really interested. And I'll take Gen AI as one of the stuff that is happening right now. I like what Cece said. You always need to reassess, where are you, right? It's not everything that is trending that we have to do. It's really not. But it's how do you actually just know enough for where you are as well. So as skills are coming up and our organization has got the tools, because it's not just about taking people for training for the sake of training. As if they're going for training, will they be able to actually implement this? Because we do have this skill, I mean, we do have the tools to enable further for them to explore and experiment within our environment, then definitely would encourage all of those things. So it becomes important, assess where your current environment is. If there's different opportunities, enable an environment for experimentation and innovation. And that goes with your skills as well. Then people are most likely to dabble in these little things. We might find that we can use it and we can't use it with caution because there's privacy and all of those things that we need to take into account. But I think it's just important that you allow an environment for experimentation even when it comes to skills. I do have it as a KPI as well. You have to show, like upskilling, it's really a thing. You need to show me that you are doing some sort of training and you're improving yourself one way or the other. So it becomes important for me in that manner. Just continuously be curious. I think that's it. It's always have a curious mind. When you're curious, and I don't want to confine it because what you find interesting might be completely different, but it actually might add value within our environment. So I allow people to actually be curious. Let's see how it can help us, and then we upskill and then we move forward as a team.
Thank you so much. Super powerful session. Absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and like the time absolutely flew. So really thank you for sharing so much wisdom. Even in the chat, Nozisa says, thank you for the insightful and practical ways that on how to implement a data-driven culture. And I think we're all walking away from this webinar much richer in terms of knowledge and expertise. So again, thank you to everyone online and our panelists. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much,
All right,
everybody.
thank you. Very
Thank
grateful.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yeah.